On the night of July 23, 2008, the air over Bridger, Teton National Forest in Wyoming was still and warm, the sky clear of clouds. 17-year-old Hannah Kendrick, newly graduated from high school in Denver, sat beside a small fire with her sister Lillian, 21, a University of Colorado student. Marshmallows browned slowly over the flames as the sisters laughed and spoke about Hannah's future, about college, about the life waiting just beyond summer. Granite Creek Campground was alive with quiet presence. Nearly 20 tents dotted the area, families settling children to sleep, older couples resting after long drives, groups of friends enjoying the wilderness. It felt ordinary. Peaceful. The Kendrick sisters had arrived the previous day, July 22, in a rented Jeep Cherokee, intending to spend 4 days immersed in the forest's calm beauty. Camping had been a ritual their father, Marcus Kendrick, began years earlier. Every summer, without fail. After his death from cancer 3 years before, the tradition became something sacred. A thread tying past to present. Though Lillian now lived in a dormitory and life was changing, she and Hannah returned to the woods together to honor him and each other. Their mother, Deborah, had hesitated. The idea of her daughters alone in the forest unsettled her. "Take pepper spray," she insisted. "For bears." Lillian complied, buying 2 cans at a roadside shop, even as she believed the fear was overstated. There would be rangers, crowds, safety. She reassured her mother over the phone before they left. Everything would be fine. Around 9 p.m., a couple camping nearby, Tom and Linda Hoffman from Utah, their tent set roughly 30 meters away, watched the sisters extinguish their fire and retreat into a blue 2-person tent. "Good night," Lillian called softly. Tom answered in kind. Those words marked the final moment anyone heard from Hannah and Lillian Kendrick. The next morning, July 24, Linda Hoffman woke shortly after 7 a.m. Something felt wrong. The sisters' tent still stood, but its entrance hung wide open. A section of fabric along the side appeared torn. Nearby lay a sleeping bag, scattered clothes, a flashlight. The Jeep remained parked. The girls did not. At first, Linda assumed they had gone to the restroom or the nearby stream, barely 100 meters away. But as time passed and the campsite stayed silent, concern grew. By 8 a.m., Tom approached the tent. What he discovered erased any doubt. The fabric had been sliced from the inside, a long, vertical gash made by something sharp. Their belongings were disturbed, as if searched in haste. The sisters' backpacks rested close by, partially emptied. Phones, wallets, and car keys were left behind. The essentials of identity and escape remained untouched. The girls themselves had vanished. Rangers were called immediately. James Coleman arrived within 20 minutes and recognized the severity at once. A cut tent. Abandoned possessions. Missing people. Backup was requested. Other campers were questioned. No one had heard cries or movement during the night. Only the forest's familiar chorus, owls calling, wind brushing through trees, coyotes howling far away. By midday, the Teton County Sheriff's Office had taken control, launching a full-scale search. Dogs traced a scent from the tent into the woods southwest of the campground. The trail continued for nearly a kilometer before dissolving near an old dirt road. The dogs circled, confused, their signals fading. It suggested one chilling possibility: the sisters had been taken by vehicle. At 2 p.m., Deborah Kendrick received the call. When she learned her daughters were missing, she collapsed. Her brother David took the phone, gathered the details, and within the hour was driving her from Denver to Wyoming, 250 miles covered in 5 relentless hours. The search did not pause. By evening, more than 80 people were involved. Rangers, deputies, trained volunteers, search and rescue teams. A helicopter swept the forest from above. Dogs scoured the ground. Divers checked nearby water. Nothing surfaced. On July 25, investigators turned to records, hundreds of registered visitors from the previous week. Each was traced and questioned. Registered sex offenders in the county were reviewed. None were linked. Every lead closed in silence. As the days passed, the story spread. 2 sisters gone without a sound. A tent cut open beneath the stars. National media carried their faces across the country. CNN, NBC, local stations. Hannah and Lillian Kendrick became names spoken everywhere, symbols of how, in a place of beauty and stillness, something unseen had reached out and chosen them. The tip line flooded with calls in the days that followed, hundreds of voices offering sightings, guesses, and dark theories. Almost all led nowhere. By July 30th, the first week had closed with no answers, and the massive search slowly contracted. The crowds of volunteers were gone, replaced by quiet patrols, just a handful of rangers and officers moving through the forest with measured routine. At a press briefing, Teton County Sheriff Robert Mills spoke plainly. No physical evidence had surfaced. No witnesses had come forward. What remained was the grim outline of a suspected abduction, hollowed out by the absence of proof. Words without substance. A case suspended in uncertainty. Deborah Kendrick would not leave Wyoming. She took a small room in a Jackson motel, 30 kilometers from Granite Creek, and returned daily to the campsite. She stood where the tent had once been, sometimes for hours, praying, weeping, speaking her daughters' names into the trees. She plastered the town with posters bearing Hannah S. and Lillian S. faces and announced a $50,000 reward, a desperate offering to the unknown. Time pressed forward. Days dissolved into weeks. Hope thinned. Statistics whispered what no one wanted to say aloud, that with every passing hour, the chance of survival slipped further away. Investigators adjusted their focus, preparing themselves not to rescue, but to recover. They searched for bodies, not daughters. Yet no one above ground knew the truth buried beneath it. 5 kilometers from the campsite, far below the forest floor, inside a cold, damp karst cave carved by time and water, Hannah and Lillian Kendrick were still alive. Fading. Broken. Starved and traumatized, but breathing. They held on to life the way one clings to the last ember in darkness, believing, against reason, that they had not been forgotten. On the morning of August 14, 2008, 22 days after the sisters vanished, a team of speleologists from the University of Montana entered the western cave systems of the National Forest. It was meant to be routine. Academic. A methodical exploration of rock, voids, and hidden corridors. Mapping passages. Collecting samples. Nothing more. The group consisted of 4 seasoned explorers, Professor Daniel Morris, 52, leading the expedition, alongside his students Kyle Chung, Sarah Wentworth, and Miguel Rodriguez. Around 11 a.m., they maneuvered through a narrow descent inside a formation labeled Granite Creek Cave No. 7. The site was considered unremarkable, shallow chambers, limited depth, little of interest. But Morris suspected there was more. Passages overlooked. Spaces unseen. As they descended into the main chamber, Sarah abruptly stopped. "Do you hear that?" she asked, switching off her light. They froze. Silence swallowed them. Only water dripping. Breath echoing off stone. Then, something else. Faint. Intentional. A sound cutting through the dark. A knock. Kyle suggested falling rocks. Sarah shook her head. Too even. Too deliberate. Professor Morris felt a tightening in his chest. "Let's follow it." They moved deeper, the sound growing clearer with each step. Metal against stone. 3 taps. A pause. 3 taps again. A pattern no cave could make on its own. An ancient signal. A plea. "My God," Sarah whispered. "That's someone." They hurried into a side chamber, small, low-ceilinged, barely 4 by 5 meters. Their flashlights swept the space, and then stopped. In the far corner sat 2 figures, barely recognizable as human. Not women, not yet, more like remnants. Shadows shaped like people. Their wrists were bound with bicycle cable, fastened to a thick iron pipe driven into the cave floor. One slumped forward, unconscious. The other stared back at them, eyes wide, wild, burning with something between terror and disbelief. Her lips moved, searching for words that would not come. Professor Morris broke the spell. "Kyle, call for help. Now." They rushed forward, dropping to their knees beside the girls. Shock gave way to horror. Their clothes were shredded and filthy. Skin stretched gray over bone. Hair tangled, stiff with grime. Bruises covered their bodies, cuts, abrasions, and small circular wounds that told a silent story of pain. The stench in the chamber was overwhelming: sweat, waste, rot, and suffering trapped underground. The conscious sister tried to speak. What emerged was not a voice, but a breath, thin, fragile, yet unmistakably alive. "Help, please." Sarah clasped the woman's trembling hand, fighting back tears. "You're not alone anymore. We're here. We'll help you." Tell me your name. The woman struggled to swallow, forcing the words out as if each one weighed too much. Lillian. My sister. Hannah. She tilted her head faintly toward the motionless figure beside her. Professor Morris went rigid. The name struck him like a sudden light in darkness. Lillian? Hannah, are you the Kendrick sisters? The story flashed through his mind, the headlines, the forest, the vanished girls believed lost forever. Lillian gave a weak nod. A single tear carved a clean path down her dirt-streaked face. Kyle was already shouting into the radio, his voice shaking with urgency. We need emergency medical support immediately. We've found the Kendrick sisters. They're alive. I repeat, they're alive. Granite Creek Cave 7, approximately 12 meters below ground. Miguel tried to slice through the bicycle cable with his knife, but the steel barely scratched. It won't cut, he said. We need proper cutters. Morris was already rummaging through his equipment, hands moving fast, mind racing. Sarah stayed close, holding Lillian's hand, grounding her. Who did this to you? She asked gently. Who brought you here? Lillian shut her eyes. Her body shook violently. When she spoke again, terror flooded her voice. A man, he wore a mask. A ski mask. He had a knife. She gasped for breath. He said we were his family now. That we had to pray. Pray for forgiveness. Her voice collapsed into sobs, quiet, broken sounds like an injured animal hiding from the world. Hannah stirred weakly, a faint moan escaping her lips. The rescue unfolded over 2 agonizing hours. Cave rescue specialists, paramedics, and sheriff's deputies descended into the depths. Industrial cutters finally snapped the cables. The sisters were secured onto stretchers and moved inch by inch through the narrow stone corridors, every motion careful, reverent, as if they might shatter. At the surface, 2 ambulances waited with engines running. Deborah Kendrick was called immediately. She arrived 20 minutes later, just as the stretchers emerged from the cave mouth. When she saw her daughters, thin, pale, barely recognizable, her legs gave out. She dropped to her knees and screamed. The sound tore through the forest. It was raw and ancient, a cry woven from unbearable pain and overwhelming relief. Even the seasoned rescuers could not look away without swallowing hard. Hannah and Lillian were rushed to St. John's Hospital in Jackson. Inside the emergency ward, doctors worked without pause. The findings were devastating: severe malnutrition, critical dehydration, multiple infections, signs of sexual assault, second-degree burns, fractured fingers that had healed incorrectly, a concussion in Hannah's case, and kidney damage in both sisters. Hannah weighed just 38 kilograms at 167 centimeters tall. Lillian weighed 42 kilograms at 171 centimeters. In less than 3 weeks, each had lost more than half their body weight. Yet they were alive. Against reason. Against probability. As doctors fought to stabilize them, law enforcement sealed off the cave. It became sacred ground of another kind, a crime scene. Forensic teams combed through every shadowed corner. They cataloged empty food cans, stew, beans, peaches, plastic water bottles, filthy blankets, a battery-powered flashlight. Most telling were the footprints pressed into damp clay. Clear. Deliberate. Roughly size 44 or 45. The tread pattern stood out, distinctive, recognizable. Merrill Moab hiking boots. Casts were made. Loose hairs were collected, none belonging to the sisters. DNA samples were rushed for analysis. A cigarette butt lay near the wall. Marlboro. Saliva still clung to it. Enough. 3 days later, on August 17, Lillian was finally strong enough to speak. Detective Margaret Hughes of the Teton County Sheriff's Office sat beside her hospital bed, pen moving steadily, capturing every word as the truth, long buried, began to surface. Lillian told investigators that the nightmare began shortly after 3 a.m. on July 23. She woke to a strange sound, fabric giving way under pressure. Someone was slicing into their tent from the outside. Before fear could turn into a scream, a figure forced his way inside. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his face erased behind a black ski mask. In one hand, he held a long hunting knife. In the other, a gun. His voice was low and certain. Speak, he warned, and they would both die. Hannah stirred, saw him, and screamed anyway. The man struck her with the pistol's grip. She collapsed instantly. Blood spread across the tent floor. Plastic restraints bit into their wrists. Gags silenced them. He hauled them out into the night, slinging Hannah over his shoulder like cargo. Lillian was pushed ahead, barefoot, a blade pressed into her spine. They moved through the forest for what felt like forever, time fractured by shock. Stones tore her feet. Branches cut her skin. She did not know how long they walked, only that it did not end. Eventually, they reached a vehicle. An old, dark pickup truck. The make didn't matter. He shoved them into the back seat, threw a tarp over their bodies, and drove. Roughly 30 minutes later, the engine stopped. They were dragged out again, led through trees, and down into the mouth of a cave. Cold swallowed them. Damp air. Darkness. Inside, he secured them to an iron pipe embedded in the stone, using a bicycle cable. Only then did he remove their gags. His first words echoed in the chamber like a sentence passed down from above. They belonged to him now. God had sent them, both a trial and a reward. They would be cleansed. They would pray. Lillian asked why. What sin had they committed? What did he want from them? The answer came as a blow to her face. Questions were forbidden. Obedience and prayer were all that mattered. Then he left them alone, chained in the dark. The following 22 days blurred into something unreal. He returned without pattern, sometimes after a day, sometimes after 3. He brought canned food and water. He made them eat, insisting that God did not want them dead, only broken enough to repent. He forced them to recite prayers aloud, words he dictated. When their voices faltered or resistance surfaced, punishment followed. The cruelty was relentless. Beatings. Burns from cigarettes pressed into skin. Sexual violence. First Lillian. Then both sisters. He called it purification. He claimed God demanded it. He was mad, Lillian said through tears. He spoke of visions. Of voices. Of angels sent to test him. At times, he touched them gently, stroked their hair, called them his daughters, said he loved them. Then, without warning, the tenderness vanished, replaced by rage and pain. The swings were terrifying. There was no logic. Only fear. Hannah, who regained consciousness 3 days after the rescue, confirmed everything. She filled in what Lillian could not recall through trauma. She remembered being photographed multiple times with an old digital camera. She noted his accent, Southern, possibly Texas or Oklahoma. She recalled a tattoo on his right arm, a cross, with writing she couldn't fully read by lantern light. With these fragments, detectives began to narrow their search. They reviewed religious figures and church affiliates within a 100-kilometer radius. They focused on those with disciplinary histories, extremist views, or conflicts tied to faith. One name surfaced again and again. Roy Weston. 46 years old. Former Baptist preacher. Resident of Pinedale, 60 kilometers from the campsite. Weston had been removed from ministry in 2002 for radical behavior and inappropriate conduct. The church never released full details, but former members described sermons steeped in obsession, sin as disease, suffering as cure, pain as divine instruction. After his dismissal, Weston withdrew to a cabin near Bridger, Teton National Forest. Alone. Isolated. Surviving on odd jobs, handyman work, guiding hunters. No close neighbors. The nearest house sat 12 kilometers away. Detectives checked his records. His shoe size, 45. Investigators confirmed that Weston owned an aging blue Ford F-150, a 1996 model. Store receipts showed regular purchases of Marlboro cigarettes. On his right arm was a tattoo, an upright cross etched with the words, "Redeemed by Blood." At dawn on August 18, a tactical operation was launched. A SWAT unit, sheriff's deputies, and FBI agents, more than 20 armed officers, encircled Weston's remote cabin. They expected a fight. They expected violence. Instead, they found silence. The door was forced open. The rooms were empty. Weston had vanished. Yet he had left his mind behind. Inside the cabin, officers discovered a journal, a thick notebook packed with frantic handwriting. Page after page spilled with distorted theology, fragments of scripture, accounts of divine visions. And woven through it all was a recurring image, 2 angels. July 23. The Lord has shown me a sign. 2 young souls in need of salvation. I took them. The flesh resists, but the spirit must obey. July 25. They cry for mercy. They do not understand that suffering is the path to cleansing. July 30. The elder angel is beginning to pray with me. The younger still rebels. More purification is required. The entries continued until August 14, the day the sisters were discovered. The final lines were written in haste. I hear them in the forest. The Lord tests my faith. I must withdraw. The angels remain. If God wills their rescue, so be it. If not, their souls will rise to him. They also recovered a digital camera. The memory card held images no one wanted to see, Hannah and Lillian bound, bruised, crying in the cave. Proof, in Weston's mind, of divine purpose. A hand-drawn map marked the cave's exact location. Nearby sat a pair of Merrill Moab hiking boots, their tread identical to the prints preserved in clay underground. The sisters' clothing was found as well, shirts taken and kept, like relics. But Weston himself was gone. A nationwide manhunt began immediately. His photograph flooded television screens, newspapers, and online bulletins. The FBI labeled him extremely dangerous. The reward climbed to $100,000. Tips poured in. Every sighting was chased. Idaho, Montana, Colorado. Each lead dissolved into someone who merely resembled him. 4 days later, on the morning of August 22, a hunter named Paul Jackson noticed an abandoned blue pickup on a remote forest road roughly 30 kilometers from Weston's cabin. The engine was cold. Dust had settled. It had not moved in days. Inside were Weston's belongings, a sleeping bag, food supplies, signs of final travel. Search teams found out. About a kilometer from the truck, below a rocky escarpment, they found a body. Roy Weston lay broken at the base of the cliff. A fall of nearly 20 meters had snapped his neck and shattered his bones. Beside him rested a hunting knife and a scrap of paper bearing a final message: "Forgive me, Lord, for failing your work. I come to you now." Whether he jumped or slipped was never conclusively determined. The medical examiner could not say. Perhaps the pressure closed in. Perhaps the weight of his own delusions carried him over the edge. However it happened, his story ended there. For Hannah and Lillian, the news carried two opposing truths. There was relief: their tormentor could never return. There would be no courtroom, no repeated retelling of horrors beneath fluorescent lights. But there was also a quiet bitterness. Justice, in its human form, had been denied. I wanted him to live behind bars, Lillian said a year later. I wanted him to be caged the way he caged us. But maybe this is enough. He's gone. And I can move forward knowing he will never touch anyone again. And so the chapter closed, not with a trial, not with answers, but with survival. Chosen not by fate, but by endurance. Still here. Still breathing. Still moving toward the light. Healing did not arrive quickly. It came in waves, slow, painful, and incomplete. The sisters remained hospitalized for 6 weeks as their bodies were restored piece by piece. Weight returned. Infections were treated. Open wounds closed. Hannah's fractured fingers were realigned and immobilized in plaster. Lillian's kidneys, pushed to the brink, gradually resumed function after intensive care. Yet what could not be measured on monitors proved far more enduring. Both sisters carried deep psychological scars. Severe post-traumatic stress followed them everywhere. Sleep brought nightmares. Darkness triggered panic. Confined spaces felt like traps. Lillian could not tolerate a closed door without her chest tightening and breath failing her. Hannah startled at sudden sounds, her body reacting before her mind could reason. Recovery demanded years, not weeks. Therapy became a way of life. Time, patience, and relentless effort slowly reshaped what had been broken. By 2012, 4 years after the kidnapping, both sisters had reclaimed something close to normalcy. Lillian completed her university studies, earning a degree in social work, and chose to stand beside others who carried trauma like she once had. Hannah entered college, studying psychology, determined to one day guide others through darkness she knew too well. Together, they put their story into words. 22 Days, Our Story of Survival became a national bestseller. They spoke publicly, not for attention, but for purpose, addressing conferences, meeting survivors, offering proof that life after devastation was possible. What happened to us was horrific, Hannah said during one speech. But it does not define who we are. We are not victims. We are survivors. And if our story gives even one person the strength to endure, to believe meaning can exist after hell, then our suffering was not meaningless. The cave that once held them was sealed permanently by authorities. Concrete closed its mouth. Above it, a small memorial was placed, 2 white stone slabs bearing their names and a simple inscription honoring sisterly love and an unbroken spirit. Deborah Kendrick transformed her grief into action. She established the Marcus Kendrick Fund, named for her late husband, to support families of the missing. The foundation finances search efforts, provides psychological support, and advocates for stronger systems to locate the lost. The story of Hannah and Lillian Kendrick became one of the most recognized accounts of abduction and survival in modern America. Not because of cruelty, but because of endurance. It reminded the world that even when hope seems extinguished, light can return. That the human spirit can withstand what should destroy it. They endured 22 days beneath the earth. They lost health. They lost innocence. But they did not lose themselves. They did not lose each other. Today, they live fully. They serve. They heal others. And their lives carry a quiet truth forward: darkness is real, but so is resilience. Monsters exist, but so do the chosen, those who rise, who endure, and who turn suffering into illumination.